HOMI is hyperosmolar medullary interstitium. This medullary interstitium, the area surrounding the loop of Henle and the collecting duct, this needs to be flooded with solute, extra solute, so that, as I mentioned, extra water can be reabsorbed. So the thick ascending limb of loop of Henle is where most of the action comes in, and actively sodium along with potassium and 2-chloride are pumped from the lumen into the interstitium. Again, this is something that we've discussed when we were discussing sodium transport. We discussed the thick ascending limb of loop of Henle, if you remember. And let me just jog your memory. Furosemide was an antidiuretic, I beg your pardon, a diuretic, which blocked that symporter. That's sodium, one potassium, 2-chloride symporter, if you remember that now. So that is the transporter which enhances the uptake of solute from inside the lumen and pumps it into the interstitium. This is the mainstay, one of the mainstays of creation of hyperosmolarity of the interstitium. The number 2 is urea. Now this may come to you as a surprise that of course your concept about urea is that it's a waste product and it's given out, it's excreted from the urine, and that is indeed the case. However, today you'll learn that urea is very ingeniously used to add to this medullary interstitium. In fact, it's 50% of the HOMI. So sodium is 50% and the other 50% is urea. And you will be interested to know that during normal situation, urea does not get concentrated in the medullary interstitium. It's only when ADH is present, as it is the case with dehydration, is when urea can cross from the exiting urine in the medullary interstitium, in the collecting medullary collecting duct, and enter into the interstitium and add to the HOMI. More on this in the urea cycle later on in this discussion. For now, what is enough is sodium and urea approximately account for the 50% each of HOMI that you need to create. Okay. Now this scary looking diagram is not very scary if you understand the basics of it. So before I go into it, please remember a couple of things. And those couple of things is the way this diagram is made. Firstly, I'll go slow here. These figures, these numbers are osmolarity of the tubular fluid. So if it's inside the tube, it's tubular fluid osmolarity. If it's outside, it is the interstitium. It is the interstitium, osmolarity of the interstitium. As you go along, dip into the inner segment of the interstitium. This is where the medulla is. Okay, and as you go away from the medulla, this is where the cortex is. Okay, so obviously the loop, the nephron is arranged in such a way that the long tubule from PCT, which lies in the cortex, then dips to the into deeper into the medulla, the outer medulla, and then in the inner, deeper medulla. These are the long loop of Henle nephrons that are involved in concentration of urine. Okay, so they really loop into the inner medulla and form those hairpin structures. Right. So I have mentioned this, that these values represent osmolarity inside the the tubule, or in the surrounding interstitium. The HOMI that you need to create is in the interstitium here. Okay. The loop of Henle not shown here, but this loop of Henle will obviously go up, make the DCT, and then here it will become the collecting duct. So the collecting duct here and the loop of Henle, the pin, the hair pin, they lie in the same neighborhood, the neighborhood of the interstitium. It's this interstitium that needs to be flooded with solute. It's this where you need the HOMI. Okay, that's one thing. Then the second thing to know about this diagram, how it's made, is that when you see these arrows, okay, this arrow here, and this swinging arrow, this arrow here, and then this arrow here, remember that this means that you have fresh fluid coming from PCT into your loop of Henle. Just stay with this program here. So this is what this means. When you have this scenario where you see that the thick ascending limb of loop of Henle, and at the level you have these strong arrows, these dark arrows. Remember that this is part of the single effect. I'll explain it to you in a bit. Just remember what I'm saying. This is the single effect, followed by the dashed arrow in the in the subsequent slide. So you see now a pattern in these slides. You have a picture, a stage rather, a phase where you see these arrows where fresh fluid is coming in. Then you see a combination of two pictures here, right here. So you brought in fresh fluid. Then a single effect happened, which is depicted in these two pictures. Okay. Then the single effect happened. Then again, you have a repetition. You have fresh fluid coming in. Then again, the single effect is happening. Okay. And then this step is repeated many times, such that the osmolarities really start to look very angry. Now, if you compare this with, say, this, certainly this is a serious number, 1200 milliosmol. It's a very high osmolarity. In fact, this is the upper limit of HOMI. HOMI can be concentrated up to 1200 milliosmoles, and consequently, concentration of urine can be raised. Osmolarity of urine can be raised up to 1200 as well, not above that. So here you pick up the concept of HOMI dictating the osmolarity of the urine. The maximum that you can create, concentrate the urine, is 1200 milliosmol, and that the reason for that is that that is the maximum capability of HOMI in the interstitium. More of this will make sense to you as we go along. Now let's go into the nitty-gritty of it. Now that if you have understood what I've set up, so say this is when everything was at peace and honky-dory, nothing was happening, no excitement. But as soon as this now goes into this is where the dehydration has happened. Plasma osmolarity has gone up. Now you need to, ADH has gone up. Now you need to create HOMI. And so the single effect will come into play. If you remember, I've been mentioning single effect earlier as well. This is that very, very interesting ability of the tubule to separate solute from water. And again, I will repeat that sodium is an osmol, which basically means that it does not like to travel alone. It will always want to take water with it. That's the case. And if you want to only reabsorb solute and not let water follow, that is called the single effect. That usually cannot happen in any other part or any other tissue except the renal tubule. Okay, and except in the renal tubule, only in the thick ascending limb of loop of Henle, which is also called the diluting segment, is where this effect mainly can be seen. So check this out now. The 300, there was 300 everywhere, right? 300 was in the fresh fluid that was coming in from the PCT. Again, the thin descending limb, the thin ascending limb, and the thick ascending limb. Anatomically, this is not correct. Of course, these are supposed to be thin, and then this area is supposed to be thick, but stay with it. It's a simple diagram. I think it's from Guyton, so it will help you. That's why I selected it. So everything is 300. Now, when you turn the charm on, when you turn the single effect on, what happens? What happens is this is 300. When it came here, so it encountered that symphotor, the sodium potassium 2 chloride importer, right? Yes. What did it do? It pulled the solute from in the lumen and pumped it into the interstitium. Yes, but did not allow water to follow because the water is permeable. This epithelium here is impermeable to water transport. The water stays back. What is the result of this one simple effect? That you raised a tad the osmolarity of the interstitium, and in comparison you diluted the osmolarity of the tubular fluid, because remember, you removed the solute but did not let water follow. So you did two insults to the tubular fluid here in the thick ascending limb of loop of Henle. You snatched the solute away from it, but kept the water there and did not allow the water to follow. So naturally, what is left behind is diluter as compared to what came in. Okay, what came in was 300, but what ended up here is basically, because of this action, is now diluter. So uh, this interstitium will get a bit rich than what it was before, because it has now received a paycheck of solute. Okay, and hence it has become 400, while the osmolarity of this fluid has become 200. Okay, if you have understood this, that's great. That's the initial phase of the single effect. Now, you have created a slight increase in osmolarity in the interstitium. Yes. And since it's a hairpin structure, it's a hairpin structure. Hairpin structures are important in thermoregulation and in this scenario, what you're reading now, the concentration of urine. In the sense that if this were a straight tube, you would have very different situation. Simply, you could never have concentrated urine. More of this later when we'll talk about the maintenance of HOMI. But it's very obvious to see that if you do something to the fluid here, which has a bearing on the interstitium here, this interstitium is the neighborhood. This is where the descending thin limb also lives. So the fluid, which now is moving inside the thin descending limb, is exposed to the same interstitium, the same neighborhood that you created by doing this action. So what happens? What happens is this fluid, which was in the thin descending limb, it's water permeable. We've spoken about it. It will give out its water. Why will it give out it? Simple osmosis. It will give out its water because the interstitium outside is more osmolar as compared to this. It was not the case here, but because of this first phase of single effect, you added solute here. This added solute will cause an osmotic drag on the water inside the thin descending limb, and the water will come out. These dashed lines is movement of water. The strong lines are movement of solute. So now you understand. This water will come out of the interstitium, raising the osmolarity out inside the fluid that is left behind in the tubule. This is very obvious. That extra water will be picked up by the vasorecta and taken away. So this 400 will be preserved, right? This is the single effect. These are the two phases of the single effect. What is the first phase? Again, I'm revising now, is the pickup of solute from the tubule and dumping it into the interstitium by the thick ascending limb of loop of Henle. This creation of the extra osmolarity in the interstitium then has an effect on the thin descending limb of loop of Henle, where water is pulled out, raising the osmolarity of this fluid now, and the extra water is taken away so that this is not disturbed. Okay, now you have done one cycle. This is one cycle. These three diagrams are one cycle. The first, then the single effect, and then that's that. Now you just need to keep on repeating this cycle. But the difference is that you have changed things. You have changed the osmolarity of the incoming tubular fluid. You have changed the osmolarity of the interstitium, and the solute single effect will take place anyway, but now it will take place on this changed fluid that you have created. So now this 400 will be pushed forward because new fluid of 300 from pre-city has been pumped in. This has been pumped in. This will push the 400 osmolarity carrying fluid forwards. It will now come to the thick ascending side of things, and it will be acted upon by the single effect. Now you can see that that 400 here, okay, will again, you will have the single effect. The symporter will pull the solute and dump it into the this interstitium, and now you see that that 400 became 300, while the 400 in the interstitium became 500. Okay. Uh, Before I go move on to this and finish this subject, you will see a mathematical symmetry in these diagrams. Whenever the single effect would take place, remember this. Remember the factor of 200. This is a cheat to understand or and remember these figures. You don't have to cram them. Whenever the single effect will take place, there will always be a difference of 200 between this fluid and this fluid, always. So you see 400 and 200 is, the difference is 200. Okay. Now when you brought in 400 here, oops, when you brought in 400 here, again, the single effect happened, made this 500, the rest was 300. What is the difference? 200. Yes. And as it goes up above, this is the maximum osmolarity at any given time. But as I mentioned, as you go towards the cortex, the osmolarity drops. So as you go up, this 500 actually is 350. But again, the difference is always 200. So this is an important thing to remember. Okay, now just to complete the cycle once again, so that the concept is solidified, uh, this 500 here will then attract water out of the descending thin limb. Okay, water will come out as is shown here, leaving behind even more increased osmolarity. From 400, it has now become to 500. That extra volume is now, the extra water is taken away from the vasa by the vasorector, so that this is preserved. You keep on repeating the single effect. You keep on bringing fresh fluid, which I'll say it in the reverse direction now. You bringing the fresh fluid of 300 into the thin descending limb of Rucophenle. It will come across increasing gradient of osmolarity in the interstitium as it moves along the thin descending limb, giving away its water, becoming concentrated itself, and by the time it hits the thin ascending and especially the thick ascending limb of Rucophenle, it will naturally give up its solute from the tubule to the interstitium, raising the interstitial fluid osmolarity even more. And this cycle sort of goes on and on and on till it becomes this. Okay, this. So at the tip of the loop, you can have a situation where the osmolarity has risen to 1200, which will obviously induce a 1200 osmolarity change in the fluid that is coming in the system and going up and out. Okay. Now, some concluding remarks about this. You see, you have understood this single effect, I hope, and eventually, let's talk about what's happening here. So, in this area, you have hyperosmolarity in the interstitium and inside the tubule. But as you move up, because you are taking out a lot of solute from here, you are diluting the segment, you are making water abundant inside the tubule and taking solute out, using the solute to attract more water out of the thin descending limb. This is the story up till now. Yes? Uh, and you have understood the trick here. The trick here is to use the solute to bring out water out of the thin descending limb. Okay, so this is one source of that extra water that I was talking about. But the main situation, the main thing will come when you consider that this DCT will then become the collecting duct. Okay, and it's this collecting duct here, which I'll show you in a bit, is where the ADH has already made inroads for that extra water to come in once it's available. Remember, ADH has inserted those aquaporins. Okay, so the stage is set. This interstitium, this here, is also available here. It's in the entire neighborhood. The whole neighborhood has become hyperosmolar. So collecting duct, this fluid of uh, this diluted fluid, heavy in water, which you have created very cleverly, now when it comes in the collecting duct, it has absolutely no choice but to give away most of its water to the hyperosmolar osmolarity through the newly made aquaporin uh, motorways under the able leadership of ADH, and that water, that precious water, is now given away, taken away by the vasorecta, which improves the, eventually addresses the osmolarity of the hyperosmolar plasma. Okay, this is the countercurrent multiplier, and this is the overall slide. You see that it's working. This is the single effect mediated hyperosmolarity. The picture now is complete. You have this collecting duct here. Okay, and this is the membrane which is ADH sensitive. Okay, this is where the ADH expresses those aquaporins, and you see that the fluid that came towards this area was dilute. This is where, look at this 100, and in fact this becomes about 300ish as soon as it's starting to hit, come back into the hyperosmolar environment, because it is now made to give out its water, a bit of salt as well, and we'll talk about the urea in a bit. So when you remove water from the fluid in the tubular fluid, what remains behind is concentrated urine, because you have taken away this water. The whole point was to reabsorb extra water. So once again, from cortex to medulla, you have created a hyperosmolar environment, so that you don't let uh, that extra water that in the tubular fluid that would have gone out, and in any case, you don't let that go out. That this hyperosmolarity drags that water in. You can see the role of ADH, uh, providing those aquaporins and all of that. So this is the HOMI and the increased ADH, which basically saves the day in a plasma hyperosmolar situation. Okay, these are the main points. Uh, Now the urea cycle, very briefly. Uh, it may look like a cluttered slide, but it's simple really. Urea is a waste product. It's cleared from the plasma. It, as you can see here, strong arrow. It's put out in the PCT, and it just flows around throughout the tubule. What is peculiar now is the following. You see that this line here, this epithelium here, has been shown very strong in dark color. This is where urea cannot go out. It's trapped inside the renal tubule. This is something which raises the concentration of urea, because uh, all sorts of things are happening in the fluid inside, but urea cannot do anything. Urea has to stay in, and hence it gets concentrated. Okay. uh, by the time this fluid hits the ADH sensitive areas, remember ADH, and now you will recall that when you read that info slide of ADH in the last lecture that we discussed, you saw that ADH not only reabsorbs water, it also enhances urea uptake. Okay, so ADH actually in this area where it's most active, not only inserts aquaporins, but it also facilitates, stimulates the insertion of UT1 receptors, urea transporter, UT1, urea transporter 1 receptors here, so that urea can leak out into the interstitium. Why would we want urea to leak out in this particular scenario in the interstitium? Because we are creating HOMI. Okay, we have spoken about the HOMI of sodium. Now we are talking about that other 50%, the urea. So check this out. The urea will exit from the collecting duct, the inner medullary collecting duct, into the interstitium, adding to the hyperosmolarity. Okay, but then it does something which sodium doesn't do. It's that it's secreted, and this is important. It is secreted into into the loop of Henle. So uh, here you literally trap urea. Whatever urea is coming from this tubular fluid, you take it out inside, keep it inside the interstitium, and then when it goes up to a significant concentration, you start to secrete it inside the lumen. Back it goes, does the whole journey back again, and so on and so forth. So you excrete less urea in concentration of urine scenario, the dehydration scenario, than you would have done normally when water was available. Because now you're using urea ingeniously to add to your HOMI, and you're trapping it in a circular fashion. Okay, I hope you understood this. You are secreting it, then it goes up and comes down. You reabsorb it from here, and then again use it to attract water and all that stuff, secrete it back, and keep on using it till you've had your fill, you have reabsorbed enough water, and the plasma osmolarity has gone up again. So this is that urea cycle that I was talking about, the 50% of the HOMI. Footnote here is that urea is a metabolic waste product. Guess which metabolism does it come out of? Protein, right? It's a protein metabolic waste product. So people, interesting fact, people who are vegans or pure vegetarians, uh, would they have the same amount of urea that a non-veg would? Of course not, because they don't eat animal protein. All the protein that they get is from vegetable sources. Okay, so the urea in these people is less. Urea production is less. Hence, the urea cycle, availability of urea for the urea cycle is less. So yes, now you know where I'm going. The ability of these people to concentrate their urine in dehydration is less, because HOMI is dependent on sodium and urea in concentration in dehydration scenario. So pure vegans will have trouble concentrating their urine because of this fact. So this is a interesting fact to note. Now, before we go to the last part, uh, let me recap what we have discussed till now. We discussed dilution of urine, where water is abundant, no rocket science there. You just remove the solute at the thick ascending limb of glucophenolate, and you let water go out. And there is no idiot, so nothing spectacular is going to happen. Now you understand that that part of the situation was simpler, right? You appreciate that now. The story becomes interesting when you want to when you go into dehydration, right? When you go into dehydration, you need to concentrate urine. It's that it's there that you need some extra situation, extra mechanisms, and that extra mechanism is counter-current mechanism, by creating HOMI, which then provides the extra pump, extra attraction for extra water to be reabsorbed. This HOMI is created collectively by sodium and urea. We've discussed countercurrent mechanism and the single effect and all that. This is the Urea cycle.